All right, let's call the Service Committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Rath, Bub, Blake. We've got 5 up here, but who's not supposed to be here?
She's just hanging out. I'm here too.
Rath, Blake, Bub, and Lang. We have no ordinances or resolutions on the agenda other than to discuss ordinance number 19-43, controlled Canada geese hunt, hunting program within the city limits. This was in our last service committee meeting. This was passed on to full council for a vote against my advice, but was anyways. We're meeting again today just to discuss it, and I see we have Deputy Chief, and I apologize if I screw up and call you Sergeant again.
It's okay.
Deputy, yeah, just you get promoted so fast I can't keep up with your career. But we have Deputy Chief McKee here, who I understand, I do know that wrote and implemented our urban deer hunting program several years ago, and will also be administrating this program as well. Is that correct?
That'd be correct.
Okay. So if you could give us an overview, and I understand, I guess let me preempt that with saying that this legislation is only legislation allowing this program to come to fruition. The actual administration of the program is something that comes after the legislation. It is not part of the legislation. So that'll be something that will be written and implemented by Deputy Chief McKee and the Newark Police Department.
That is correct.
So if you can give us an overview, I would appreciate that. A little bit of history as well, maybe.
Well, several years ago, the Parks Department got with me in reference to doing a controlled hunt up at TJ Evans Ponds. They were having a huge problem up there. The problem with just hunting geese is they're federally and state protected game animals. So you have to jump through a lot of hoops if you wish to do that. We had current city ordinances about prohibition of hunting in the city, so we were going to have to get over that hurdle. We drafted a temporary legislation, if you will, through the law director's office in case that came to fruition. They chose not to do that at the time, which was the Parks Department. They chose to do the egg coating program, which you have to get permits for as well. You cannot disturb a goose nest in the state of Ohio once it is down without one of these permits through ODNR. So that in and of itself was a huge undertaking, and they did that with some success. The problem with Canada geese within a city in an urban population, they have now taken up residency. They're very adaptable animals. So you're dealing with two types of the birds. You're dealing with our resident population that do not migrate. They stay here year round. They love it here. Then you deal with the migrating population, which are coming south from Canada, and they will just stop over here. So throughout the springtime, you're dealing with our resident population, and then in the fall time, you're dealing with the migratory population. In order to handle that, just one of the avenues would be to allow persons who are experiencing issues with this to use hunting as an example. Hunting will always be the cheapest method for a city. Everything is pushed onto the hunters. They buy the equipment, they buy the licenses, we just regulate it. So same thing with the deer hunting program. That's what I recommend be allowed for this, is just to move it on. We can deal with the regulations at a later time. We haven't even thought of them. I would imagine they'll mirror the deer hunting thing a little bit as far as the property owners must be registered as well as the hunters. They will have to hold harmless agreements against the city, which our bow hunters currently do. So that's basically how this came to fruition. So over the years since we discussed it with the Parks Department, I've had several goose hunters every year call me, can I hunt geese in the city? No, no, no. And I tell them, go seek and find the legislation and just have it written. Well, somebody actually did that this time. So it was not me, although I do support it. Just like I said, the city will regulate this program. So the legislation was introduced and passed on. So like I said, this is just one facet. It will, unfortunately, this legislation will only affect areas within the outlying areas of the city. There is not going to be goose hunting downtown here on this square. It's just not practicable. So there really are only a few places that this portion of the legislation will affect throughout the city. But I think to the betterment of it. Many people spoke last time. I know Director Baum spoke about the damage it does to the trout club. There are people out west with crop damage, landscape damage, ponds being able to not recover because of the amount that geese go to the bathroom constantly. So there is some damage aspects here. And hunting is maybe only one. But the private property owners, like I said, the city's already doing its part by the egg coating program, and now we move on to this to assist with these residential geese. The other private property owners who may push for this, it's up to them whether they want to employ any other methods, and there are a bunch of them to try. Hunting is just one. So by doing multiple stage approach, I think you would have a better angle in taking care of this problem.
Whatever the method is that private property owners would use, is it correct to assume that they're not going to implement any program or any technique without the consent, express consent of ODNR?
Well, they can already harass them to a certain point as long as they're not on nest. They can employ dogs and lasers and air cannons and all kinds of things now without any sort of consent. But as far as hunting goes,
you can shoot
that's
them away,
when
but you can't do anything to decrease the population.
Correct.
Or control the population.
In somewhat, yes. So,
okay. Can you explain, just for general knowledge purposes, what it takes for an individual to be able to hunt geese?
Okay, so they need an Ohio hunting license, which costs about $19. And that cost seems to go up every year, which is fine. Then they also need an Ohio wetland stamp, which costs $15. And then they also need a federal migratory bird stamp, which costs $25. That's just to go out. Now they need special ammunition because most of the time they're using shotguns, so the shot has to be non-environmentally evasive. So they have to have steel shot instead of lead shot so it doesn't pollute waterways and such. So there is a large undertaking. Like I said, the bird hunting the people who bird hunt put a lot of money and effort into doing it.
Yeah, personally, I'm finding out it's definitely not a poor man's sport.
That is correct.
Not to mention the cost of decoys, layout lines, and anything else that you want. Boats.
I'm not sure those would be necessary in the city, but I mean.
Well, there would be. At least a kayak would be at T.J. Evans. If you are going to shoot something out of water, you're not going to walk out into the T.J.
Right.
Evans pond in hip waders.
Right, you would need a dog or something. One of the other issues why hunting is kind of beneficial is these geese over time do learn. Like Ms. Hall said last time, if they have a nest here, when they leave here, they will come back to the same area. They do every year. If you shoot at them, they will stop coming back, okay, to a point. So especially the residential geese, they will be gone. We will not have that problem. The migratory waterfowl, we will still have those problems. However, they will not use it as a stopover point if you create a situation where they are uncomfortable with doing so.
Mm-hmm. So the residential geese, even though the residents here, is that a birth to death, or could these birds have been shot at before?
Oh, they could have, sought refuge here. They could have been born here and just like it here, and the weather doesn't get cold enough for them to leave here. Okay, but a goose life expectancy is about 27 years. So,
come on, I didn't know that.
A goose couple can turn into 50 or 100 geese in a relatively short amount of time if you're not employing measures to take care of that. And we saw that at T.J. Evans. T.J. Evans Ponds was getting overrun years ago with geese. You couldn't walk there, kids couldn't play there. There were just geese everywhere. And then they get territorial during the nesting season. So if you get close to a goose, they will come after you, and they won't stop until they think you are not a threat anymore.
And close isn't really that close.
Right.
Really.
They're large animals. They can get up to 20 pounds. I mean, they're big. They're big birds.
So what do you foresee possibly the criteria being for a property being able to allow hunters on and taking advantage of this program?
I would like them to demonstrate some sort of issue with them, not just cause. But I think they should have some sort of issue with something going on. That loss could just be a nuisance. I don't know.
What about size, geographic location?
Well, obviously, like I said, I can only think of the outlying areas because we are dealing with firearms here. So there's going to be some pretty strict regulations. I've contacted ODNR. I've talked to the wildlife biologists. They are all in favor of this 100%. They're going to offer some guidance. Unfortunately, there's really no cities who've done this before. So other than very controlled hunts. So once again, just like with the deer hunt thing, we'll be kind of the guinea pigs for it. But we'll make it a success. It'll work out.
Okay. Any questions from anybody on the committee? Mr. Blake?
I'm just a familiar, like I said at the last committee meeting, I'm just not familiar with the whole goose issue. You know, or too many deer in my neighborhood, but I don't have too many goose that come up on Gaynor Avenue. So if you could so a lot of these are just going to be very educational.
Sure.
You know, so and some questions have come up since the last time. But let me start. Since you said that you didn't actually write this, have you reviewed?
I've reviewed that legislation.
So you're fine with the
oh yeah,
way it's written
100%. Yes, it was sent to me. They said, "Do you have any issues?"
Okay.
No, I don't have
Okay. Related to the question came up to, you said it use shotguns with lead.
Steel.
The steel ones.
Yes.
Okay. And so is that the only type of weapon that people will be able to use?
Well, you can use a longbow, but
Longbow.
it'd be difficult to kill a goose with a longbow.
Okay.
Oddly enough, you can't hunt them with a crossbow in the state of Ohio. A longbow you can.
Okay.
But you wouldn't be able to. I don't know anybody that's ever hunted a goose with a bow and arrow. They may exist, but it would be very difficult to kill a goose with a bow and arrow.
Okay. With the shotgun with the steel. Okay, I got you there. And then when we talk about the hunter going and getting the geese, are they required at that point to remove?
Yes,
the
they'll
carcasses?
retrieve it and remove
Okay.
it. Yes.
So they'll be required to do that.
And we do that with the deer hunting thing. We make sure that there's no carcasses left out in the field. That's in our deer hunting regulation. That I would imagine would be exactly in this regulation as well.
Okay, all right. And then the locations in the city. You said the outlining spaces. So is that other than what was mentioned on Trout Club? What other?
We were thinking Trout Club, T.J. Evans, Councilman Rath mentioned Crystal Lake, maybe some areas out west. You know, Waste-to-Way Systems, Kaufman Road, somewhere out there, maybe.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Marmee, could you come up, please, for a second?
there may be some in the south end too. I don't know if somebody's having an issue. I don't know if Don Edwards Park has an issue with them during the fall. Probably not, because baseball's closed at that point in time and the fields can recover. But
Right.
I don't know if they land there or not.
Okay. And then you made a comment saying that ODNR was supportive. of
Yes,
this.
very supportive of
And then
it.
you mentioned a second organization. What was that second?
No, he's the wildlife biologist for ODNR.
It's ODNR Wildlife.
And the game warden and the District 1 office as well. I contacted all three of them for some sort of guidance on it. Are there any other cities who have employed this and in an urban environment, if you will?
Gotcha.
But unfortunately, not every city is set up the same. So it's
Okay. All right. Well, that and then final question, just really educational. I have no idea what egg coding program is. So what is egg coding?
Okay. This is kind of weird, but most people would think if you find a goose nest, if you just take the eggs, they won't hatch, right? And the geese will leave them alone. Well, if you take the eggs, the geese will just lay more. So they have programs which they either call them egg shaking, which we didn't do that one, but they actually drill a hole into the egg, shake it up, which kills the embryo inside, and then they leave the egg there. We did the egg coating, which they coat them in like mineral oil. They don't produce at that point in time, but the eggs stay there. So the geese will sit on them the whole time, and then they just figure their stuff didn't hatch. So they won't lay again till next year. So that's how the program has some success, because those geese just sit on eggs that are never going to hatch and carry on with their lives after that. But if you take the eggs or crush them or do something, they'll just lay more.
I see. So we have someone that goes around like Evans, and
We did,
do this and-
yep, and they have to get a permit through ODNR, and that's very controlled. As to how many, you have to keep track of all that. It's probably a nightmare. The Parks and Recreation did that. We didn't have any permits.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? Dee?
Just one quick question. As there are hunters that can go in and shoot the geese, can they also process them and just keep them for food?
Okay, that is yes. The goose hunters eat the animals. It's a game bird. You can eat it. So I don't know of any hunters that just shoot things and let them lie. I don't know anybody
Well, I
like
mean,
that.
how
but-
else would they dispose of them? I mean, if they
So-
have to take them,
Right.
where do they?
You process them at home and then throw the carcasses in the trash, or
Oh.
and then
Okay.
so they're biodegradable. So they.
I just don't want to. I don't want to find them in our water system.
Oh no. And you do anyway, because they die of old age, and coyotes and other animals get a hold of them, and so that. But if you're talking piles and piles, you wouldn't have that anyway. So because we will be doing this in coordination with the Ohio hunting season, at least for now. The bag limits are set, so each hunter can only shoot so many a day, and they can only possess so many at one time. So, like even in your freezer at home, you're only allowed to possess so many. So until you eat some or get rid of some, you can't get any more. So there are limits in place for that. So you're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming up. I'm sure that if and when this passes, which I don't anticipate it not, but if and when this passes, you'll be getting to work on implementing the program.
Yes, this season's goose season actually ends February 8th, so this won't be done by this year. So
Sure.
we're looking at the 2021-2022 season.
So sometime next year, or I'm sorry, sometime later this year, when you have a program that's implemented, if you can come back, give us a rundown of what it is that you're planning, the places that you're planning.
Oh yeah, we'd be glad to.
Things like that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Somebody? All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Up next will be Personnel Committee.
Okay, it is 6:05. We will call this Personnel Committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Ryan Bubb, Sean Fennell, Jonathan Lang, Mark Labutus, Dee Hall. It is to note, Ordinance 19-45 has been pulled by Mr. Ellington for this evening. Therefore, we will move to 19-44. It's an ordinance amending the position classification and position authorization tables of the City of Newark by abolishing the position of Account Clerk 2 for the Department of Public Service. Service Director Rhodes is at the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was in here a couple weeks back creating a new position, one of the items that Councilman Marmee asked me is to come back and abolish position. And that's exactly what we're doing. This is an unfunded position that exists within the service department, and just simply asking to abolish it.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments regarding this ordinance?
Make a motion.
Okay.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor by Lang, a second by Hall. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving this on to full council can signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Last item on tonight's agenda is Ordinance 19-52. It's an ordinance setting compensation and stating policy with respect to police and fire chiefs and deputy chiefs of the City of Newark, Ohio, repealing all ordinances and resolutions in conflict with this ordinance and declaring an emergency. It is important to note this tonight will only be discussion due to the time frame of when this was submitted. No voting can occur. So with that being said, Safety Director Baum is at the podium. You can proceed.
Okay, so you got a copy of the chief's policy, or you should have. Please open it up to page 5, which is the first change, if you'd care to. It's the hospitalization medical insurance. The employee share is moving from 12% to 13.5% this year to 15% next year. The city share will be 86.5% this year and 85% thereafter. That follows the 3 union contracts. The next change is page 8, which is wages. 3 things happened with wages. Number 1, the police chief and police deputy chiefs, their wages were raised a few $100s to equal the fire chief and fire deputy chief. They're both CEOs of their organization. Their assistants are running different departments within that organization. They're both responsible for the safety of the city, although in different manner. They have roughly an equal amount of personnel. Fire has a little more. But they both have the same level of responsibility, which is pretty high. So we equaled out their pay. The second thing that happened was the chiefs made 5.35 within just to take it to 2 decimal points, 5.35% above deputy chiefs. That amounts to $17 a day. I think for the liability that they incur, a little bit of a bump was warranted, so I moved them to 8% with the mayor's consent. So the administration feels 8%. It's a good starting point. The third thing that happened was they were all given 4, 4, and 4 like the rest of the employees. So your changes, insurance went to 85.15 over 2 years. Chiefs were given an 8% differential. Police was raised to be equal to fire, and they were given 4, 4, and 4 like the rest of the employees. That's the extent of the changes. Do you have any questions?
Does anyone from this Personnel Committee have any questions for Safety Director?
Mr. Chair, just point of
Mr.
clarification. The plan is then to introduce this by Rule 11 at our next meeting, full council meeting, or when would this legislation be voted on by council?
Mr. Marmee, a question by Mr. Lang. Was the plan to evoke Rule 11 at the council meeting after this, not tonight, but in 2 weeks, to evoke Rule 11, or does this need to be going to have to be passed out of committee in 2 weeks?
That can be discussed, yeah. Either way, either an emergency or Rule 11.
Okay. Because we would have to have another committee, prior to.
Right.
So, I guess my hope, I hope it would evoke Rule 11 since, we have everybody here together this evening. I would certainly hope we can do that in 2 weeks.
Okay. But then the plan is still, it would be retroactive back to January 1.
Yes,
so
this would all happen.
That's the only other point I wanted to make was
It
since
would be retro.
there's going to be retro, since it takes effect 30 days after the mayor's signature, they're going to be waiting one.
Right.
Thank you.
Certainly will do that. So, does anyone from the audience have any questions or concerns? Okay. Seeing none, again, we can't vote on this evening. I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.